Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started then. So thanks everyone for your patience and welcome. Today we'll be discussing how making your warehouse paperless will help transform your future. Today's webinar is delivered collaboratively by riteSCAN and SYSPRO. The goal of today is to show you how riteSCAN can help to transform your warehouse to run more efficiently by being paperless. With everything going on with COVID, we want to make sure that we're giving you the right tools in order to adjust with the new norm. Okay, let's get started. We'll run through some initial housekeeping items and some introductions before we start. From RiteSoft, we have Ryan Winnicky, who is the product manager at RiteSoft. He's been at RiteSoft for many years, and he is going to guide us through a short presentation and then dive into the demo. My name is Tara Caminetta. I'm your account executive. I've been at SYSPRO for over 3 years now, and just started managing customers on the West Coast about a year ago. So I've spoken to most of you, and if I haven't, I'll be contacting you to introduce myself. So as discussed, we'll be covering the paperless warehouse and how automation and optimization are becoming a true basic necessity of any warehouse environment. From there, Ryan will be doing a live demo. He'll walk us through what this looks like in riteSCAN. And then as far as questions, we definitely welcome all your questions. Please put them in the chat. And we left about 10 minutes or so for the Q&A session at the end to cover your questions. If by chance we don't get to all the questions, please feel free to email them to me and we'll be sure to get you a response. Also to note, we will be recording the session and we should hopefully be able to distribute this to you tomorrow. So you can distribute this to anybody else who was not able to attend today. Okay, so I guess, Ryan, if you wanted to go ahead and start.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the introductions and welcome everyone today. Of course, with everything going on in the market, in the world right now, the topic is really COVID, and we just want to touch on that briefly just to see how it's impacting us and how it's impacting you and the supply chain. So when we talk about COVID, it's really impacted organizations throughout the world, and how it relates to today's discussion of paperless warehouses, what we're really going to tie together. COVID-19 has really created massive disruption across the globe. We've all seen that, and the fallout from COVID-19 has impacted every market force from financial to cultural, legal, political, you name it, it's been impacted. The pandemic has also created both demand and supply shocks in the marketplace, which has been quite interesting. All of these impacts in the market are going to impact your company, your competitors, your supply chains, all the way down the line. And researchers will be studying the social and economic impacts of this pandemic for quite some time as we reflect on it and start to trend out. The bigger question that I think is on everyone's mind in their personal life, in their business, in the organization, is what is the new normal going to be, and what does that look like, and when is it going to happen? So that's all the lingering thoughts as we're starting to move through this phase, and we want to look at that from a market perspective. So according to PwC Global Crisis Center, most crises are going to require short-term reactions around mobilization, medium-term stabilization efforts, and really strategizing for long-term and permanent transformation. However, we believe that manufacturers should strategize now on how they can transform and position their organization in ways that will give them a competitive advantage and actually help create greater resilience in a post-crisis world. And this really ought to be done on the heels of the disruption throughout the crisis and during the recovery phase. It may seem like a lot to ask of these companies as they're stretching and growing through this, but as each manufacturing sector faces its own stiff headwinds, it's indeed, according to a recent PwC survey, 74% of CFOs in US industrial product companies agreed that COVID-19 has the potential to significantly impact their business and causing great concern within their organization on how they're going to handle this and move through this. So that really brings us to our conversation today. And while the pandemic is driving considerable disruption in the market, there's a lot of significant reasons to embrace digital transformation, and how COVID-19 has actually made us revamp that and relook at that digital transformation within our organization as well. There's often a number of costs that often will go overlooked when it comes to inventory management. The first being errors, and the manual data entry often is going to result in incorrect inventory information. We all know that on average, humans make one error for every 300 characters that's manually entered. And this is a lot of times what leads to inaccurate inventory levels. You have unnecessary reorders, potential stockouts, all caused by that manual data entry process and those errors that happen from that. The second point is really the time and money. Another drawback with that is the time that it actually takes to manually enter that data and the time lag in accessing that updated information. COVID-19 really illustrated exactly how important this was to be able to access information, and accessing that information in real time was critical to prevent disruptions within your organization. The third point really comes down to warehousing costs, and everybody's trying to be lean. Ultimately, inventory inaccuracies are going to bloat your inventory levels and increase your warehouse space requirements. And this is what really ends up tying up capital and impacts your ability to innovate or stay ahead of your competitors in the global market that we're facing. The last one, which often actually goes overlooked more than one would think, is customer and employee satisfaction. The inaccuracies that are just inherent in manual inventory processes and leading to those stockouts and mispicks are going to lead to your unhappy customers as well as frustrated employees internally. And think about this for a minute. If you're not confident in the accuracy of your inventory, your customer service staff, when they're placing an order or trying to meet a deadline for an order, they're going to run down to the warehouse to check inventory physically because they don't trust the system. And this is what increases a lot of the labor costs and time just to process an order and ensure that your systems are in place. Mispicks is the other side of that, and mispicks also are going to impact customer satisfaction. According to a study by Intermec, a single mispick could cost a warehouse around $22 on average, and it might not seem like a much, but over the course of a year, it really can add up. And the survey really indicated that the cost of mispicks in a single distribution center costs on average about $389,000 a year. So it really does add up, and it really can affect your business. One of the other key factors in that is, in today's labor market, hanging on to good employees is critical. And having processes and procedures and systems in place that are going to make it easier for them to do their job is very important as well, to ensure that customer satisfaction in the warehouse as well. At the end of the day, we look at all of these issues, and all of these issues are going to impact your bottom line. And what we're looking at in today's conversation is how using a simple warehouse solution with barcodes and scanning is going to help eliminate some of these mistakes, prevent those mispicks, improve your lot traceability perspective, and really just help streamline your warehouse processes as a whole. So as we talk about the paperless warehouse, and a lot of people are wondering, what should we expect from this? What does this look like within our organization when we talk about a paperless warehouse? Well, when you evaluate implementing a solution to help move your warehouse towards a paperless environment, one of the most important elements of the business today is having access to visibility of real-time information. So moving to an automated solution really helps provide more accurate real-time information that you can trust with your system of record. And this is also going to reduce the paperwork that's floating around your warehouse waiting to be entered into the ERP system. We all know how much paperwork is floating around with handwriting on it, that you're trying to read it, you're not sure what it is, and then it's getting entered at a later point in time. Those are the types of things we're helping to try solve within your organization. And all of these improvements really help streamline your warehouse operations, ultimately improving your inventory accuracy at the end of the day. So the question is often asked, what does this look like moving to a paperless system? And it really begins with the use of moving away from paper as the transaction or record holder that is going to get entered later by someone else for that specific transaction, what was physically happening out on the warehouse floor. So now we're going to be moving towards a mobile device on the warehouse floor that's going to be able to scan barcodes and automate those transactions in SYSPRO in real time. Some of the transactions and documents, when you're thinking about this, that you can expect to reduce the need of paper and handwriting for is going to be if you've done a manual stock take. We know how cumbersome that manual stock take process can be, handing out pick tickets or count tickets, writing down what we counted, somebody grabbing those tickets, consolidating all of that information, reading the handwriting, and then entering it into SYSPRO. That's a very time-consuming process. So that's one example. The other is your pick tickets, being able to automate that picking process of those pick tickets rather than writing down what lot number a end user picked or writing how many they picked and handing that in. It's all automated with the system. The other big one comes down to your job cards, travelers, work orders, whatever you want to call it. That consolidates all of the material consumptions that are being used, as well as how many did we produce. That's getting entered into SYSPRO for your WIP processes as well. The last sort of one document that we want to talk about as well is the receiving document. So often customers are going to have a PO receipt document that gets written on to say how many did we receive, are we short any, what lot numbers did we receive, and so on. Then that document gets handed into the front office to actually be receipted into inventory. Well, now we can do that through the system by being able to simply receive that information directly through riteSCAN into SYSPRO, into inventory, and now just writing down the GRN or printing a GRN label that's sent to the front office for the accounting team to review and consolidate, rather than actually manually entering that data. So those are some of the different documents and systems and processes to think about as we look at this. So we've discussed the outcomes of what to expect in moving towards a paperless warehouse environment and some of the different documents associated with that. So we also want to spend some time talking about how can riteSCAN help assist you in going through that digital warehouse transformation, and what does that process look like? So if you don't know who RiteSoft is or riteSCAN, riteSCAN is actually developed by RiteSoft, which we're a company based out of Minnesota in the US. And we really focus on data collection for small to medium-sized manufacturers and distributors, specifically in the SYSPRO space. Really, our key with RiteSoft and riteSCAN is how can we provide a simple solution for those operators that are using our products day in and day out in the warehouse. It's currently used worldwide by about 2,500 end users across 10 countries, specifically in the SYSPRO market space. And it's in a number of verticals, from food and bev to biomedical, parts machining, and many other spaces as well. Tara, do you just want to talk a little bit about the partnership that we've had over the years?
Sure, yeah. So SYSPRO has partnered with RiteSoft for more than 5 years, providing exceptional support and value to our customers. So they are a preferred partner with SYSPRO.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's really one of the benefits when you're looking at solutions in the space. You've invested a lot of time and money and years into SYSPRO. You want a solution that's going to be partnered very closely and utilize that SYSPRO system to the fullest extent, and that's really what riteSCAN does. So when we talk about riteSCAN and where it's used and how it's used within your organization and in the warehouse, I really like to break it into these 3 categories to really look at where it's going to be consumed and used. The first one is going to be inventory. When I think of inventory, it really comes down to your day-to-day inventory items that you're going to be performing in the warehouse, from standing in the middle of your warehouse and wanting to look up inventory to see how many you have on hand or where it might be at. You're able to do those inventory or bin queries right through riteSCAN. The other key element is going to be your stock take or cycle count process. Being able to automate that stock take process is going to be one of the fastest ways to get an ROI on your investment when you're looking at the system, and being able to automate that stock take process specifically with SYSPRO. Some of the other day-to-day inventory transactions that you'd be thinking about doing would be anything from warehouse movements to bin transfers if you're using bins with SYSPRO, along with just inventory adjustments, expense issues, and miscellaneous receipts as well. So those are all some of your day-to-day inventory transactions that riteSCAN can help you with. The other sort of category that we want to look at is the order processing. So really breaking this into the 2 categories of inbound and outbound. So being able to receive your POs to get those items into inventory as fast as possible. If you're using goods in transit, being able to receive your goods in transits in or SCTs. And then on the flip side of that is the outbound processes. Being able to do a supply chain transfer or being able to pick a sales order and allocate those items that are being sent to the customer, ensuring that those customers are getting the right products, the right lot numbers, along with the right quantities that were on their orders, and automating that sales order picking process workflow as a whole. The last sort of category really comes down to the manufacturing or WIP processes. So being able to issue materials to a specific job, or being able to perform that kit issue to issue those materials, and then being able to actually receipt that finished good and do a put away to put that finished good into its end location and where it's going to go. You're also able to track labor on your jobs and being able to post that labor into SYSPRO. Or if you're using backflush processes, being able to backflush those material components as well, are all some of the transactions that you can do within manufacturing. We also have modules or add-on modules for pallet tracking within the warehouse, as well as labor tracking to track time more effectively.
Hey, Ryan, could you go into a little bit more what pallet tracking is and how it works?
Yeah, so what pallet tracking is really, it could be known as pallet tracking, or license plating is another name for it that people commonly use. But to sum it up simply, it's really the ability to group or manage inventory at a pallet or some sort of common container level. And what riteSCAN does is riteSCAN has actually added this functionality to be able to help maintain all those transactions I just talked about earlier through the use of license plates or pallet IDs. So you can make up a pallet that might contain multiple stock codes, multiple different quantities, or multiple lot numbers, and then perform those transactions through riteSCAN with those pallets to really just kind of help streamline those processes within the warehouse as well. Some of the other things that customers will use pallets for as well is staging processes. So being able to build a pallet from inventory that I might be moving to another warehouse, or being able to build a pallet based on my BOM, grabbing all the materials for a job and putting them onto a pallet that might be used later, or being able to pick a sales order and pick those items onto a pallet that's going to be shipped to a customer. So those are some other uses that customers will use pallets for within their organization as well. So with riteSCAN, really when we talk about how does it work with SYSPRO and looking at what that process looks like, riteSCAN is going to automate the data capture processes through a mobile solution along with barcodes in your organizations. And one of the biggest benefits to that data capture process in riteSCAN is that this information is all immediately validated and transmitted to SYSPRO as well. riteSCAN actually uses SYSPRO's E.NET business objects, and that's what provides a truly seamless integration to SYSPRO. You no longer are going to have to wait for data to manually be entered into SYSPRO. When your warehouse workers out there performing a transaction, that data is captured and validated in real time. One of the big key things with that validation process as well is that really stops those errors from happening that are going to get downstream, and you might find out a week later, 2 weeks later, and you got to go on a scavenger hunt to figure out what caused an inventory discrepancy, or how did this customer get this product, or the wrong quantities, and so on. riteSCAN's validating all that information right where the transaction is actually physically happening on the warehouse floor. One of the other natural benefits with SYSPRO and riteSCAN as well is all the years that you guys have spent setting up your SYSPRO environment, developing it out to meet your specific business needs. A lot of that logic carries right into the riteSCAN transactions as well, because we're so tightly integrated with SYSPRO. For example, if you set tolerances in SYSPRO on being able to receipt a PO line within 2.5%, you're going to get that same error message if I tried to over receipt over 2.5% on a PO line directly from SYSPRO. It's not something I have to additionally set up in riteSCAN. It's all tightly integrated, and they're communicating with each other in real time. and that logic is being carried over into the system and the riteSCAN transactions in real time as well. So for example, if someone tries to perform a transaction and I don't have enough inventory to perform that in SYSPRO, it's not going to let that transaction go through. And that's really what increases your inventory accuracy and makes you more efficient over time as well. So one of the other things to consider with riteSCAN and SYSPRO, when I talk about the E.net business objects, is it doesn't require you to purchase anything additional. We actually have what's called an embedded E.net with SYSPRO. And that embedded E.net license is what's going to allow riteSCAN to communicate. And that's something that's actually just included as part of the purchase of riteSCAN. So there's no additional things to set up or purchase from SYSPRO from that perspective. So riteSCAN is also going to help you with your processes for automating label printing and the barcode scanning and just streamlining your processes from receiving to moving items and picking items. When we look at what that really looks like within your organization, if you don't have barcode labels or you don't have labels on a lot of your products today, you might be thinking, where do we start? How do we even begin to look at this project? And honestly, that's where riteSCAN comes into play, is we can help you get started and move you along through those processes in a very scoped approach to get you to your end goals, moving you from A to B. So the first thing that we want to take a look at, if you're not very familiar, is automating your label printing processes through riteSCAN. So often customers are going to automate that label printing process. So when I receive a PO in each of those lines, riteSCAN is going to automatically print those labels out for me for what I just received, and now I can go put it away in inventory. Same goes for that job receipt process. I'm bringing in finished goods, print my labels, go put it away in inventory as well. So you're able to automate those processes through scanning, through riteSCAN, and then downstream now those labels and barcodes can be consumed for the rest of the processes, from stock takes to movements to issuing materials to the job or picking items on a sales order that are being shipped to a customer. So those are all things to think about when you're looking at this project, and how do I utilize riteSCAN and how do I use barcodes and labeling to really streamline my warehouse operations as well.
So Ryan, I see that the barcode has a lot number and other items on it. Can you explain the difference between the 1D and 2D barcodes and how they can be used?
Yeah, so in the example here, I actually have an example of both a 1D and a 2D barcode on this screenshot here. So in here, this is going to be what's called a 2D barcode, which is going to be typically your square barcodes, whether it's data matrix or QR. And often when the 2D barcodes are used, it's because they're putting more data into that single barcode. So for example that I have here, actually that barcode contains the stock code, the lot number, and the quantity all within a single barcode. And riteSCAN actually has a feature called SmartScan. And what SmartScan does is it can take that single barcode, parse all the data apart from it, and put it into the appropriate fields in riteSCAN. That way, rather than an operator having to scan the stock code, then scan the lot number, then scan or enter the quantity, they can just scan one barcode that contains all that information that's needed for the transaction. The 1D barcode is going to be more of your standard, what people are used to. This is where the market's going, but your 1D is going to be your vertical, horizontal lines, or vertical line barcode, and often it's going to contain less data, but it's still common, a common barcode format. So often if I'm just scanning the stock code or I'm just scanning the lot number, that's going to be more of your common 1D barcode style, whether it's code 128 or code 3 of 9.
Okay, great. Thanks for that explanation. One last question is, I see you have bartender logo on the screen. Is that required in order to print labels?
So yes, riteSCAN is going to automate the process for label printing. We often are working with bartender to automate that process. So you typically would utilize bartender to design and configure your labels. And then what riteSCAN does is we actually integrate directly with bartender. So when I perform that transaction, like a PO receipt in riteSCAN, it sends all that data to bartender and then automatically will print my labels directly from that. So those two systems together is what's really going to automate that label printing process as a whole.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. So the last kind of key thing to talk about is the transition to Android in the marketplace. If you're not real familiar with handhelds or ruggedized devices, there's really been a big shift over the last 2 years when it comes to the markets. Microsoft actually sunset Windows Mobile Platform, which was kind of the running standard for the last 15 years, at the end of 2019. And the market's really been transitioning to Android mobile devices, which in my mind are much more cost-effective devices that give you more functionality and are just easier to use as well. And with all of these enhancements, it's really where the market is going. The main two players are going to be Zebra and Honeywell, and they're both shipping all of their devices pretty much now with Android as the OS. So if you're looking at utilizing hardware or buying hardware, Android is going to be where you're going. riteSCAN does work on a number of other devices as well, from Windows Mobile, Windows CE, just a Windows client with a tethered barcode scanner as well. But Android is really where the market's moving for new devices.
So Ryan, does this mean customers can use riteSCAN on a tablet or old device?
Yep, so you can definitely use riteSCAN on a tablet. Often when customers are implementing the tablet style deployment, they're going to use a tablet with like a Bluetooth scanner that's paired to that tablet for the scanning purposes. But definitely, yeah, you can use it on a tablet device as well. Some people like the bigger screen of the tablets.
Definitely. So can customers use their own Android mobile devices?
Yeah, so we're actually starting to see the transition of, supervisors and different end users that are using those Android devices and have riteSCAN installed, even just for looking up inventory quickly. Or if you're doing a stock take, for example, they're bringing in as many devices as they can because, you're bringing in extra people to do that count process. So they're bringing in some of those additional devices and can use it on a mobile device. The only thing it doesn't currently have for the mobile devices is the built-in camera scanner. But often customers are using a paired scanner or even just manually entering that stuff still for some of those subsets of basic transactions. So definitely we're starting to see that more and more often.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right, with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to actually go into the product demo and just kind of walk through some of the different transactions that we were talking about today. I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen here if you give me just a second. And I'm actually going to be showing it to you today on an Android handheld device so you can see what it looks like on that Android device. This one specifically is actually a Zebra MC3300. But it's going to be a very common device, and you can see what it looks like in that Android platform. Let me go ahead and just share my screen here. Tara, are you able to see the riteSCAN handheld?
Yep, I can see it.
Perfect. So one of the things to know with riteSCAN is you're actually going to log in with your user credentials from SYSPRO, and that just shows the tight integration with SYSPRO specifically. One thing just to note, it's not taking up any of your user seats with SYSPRO, but this is what gives you that full traceability. So I can see a transaction was performed in riteSCAN, and I can see that transaction in SYSPRO as well, and the specific user that actually performed that transaction in SYSPRO at that point in time as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and log in here. Oops, give me just a second. Load my riteSCAN application. All right, so we're going to go ahead and log in to riteSCAN here. Sorry, I just had to reload the application. It was from earlier. It's going to be interesting today. All right, give me just a sec. Oh, guess we're just gonna have one of those days. There we go. So the first screen that you're going to see with riteSCAN is going to be the inventory tab. So with the inventory tab, we'll take a look at some of the different transactions and how they can be performed. So the first is going to be an inventory query. This is always looking at your SYSPRO inventory in real time. So you're going to see exactly what you'll see in SYSPRO. So if I wanted to load a list of stock codes right from the beginning, I can load a list of stock codes. I can also just simply scan a stock code. And this is going to look up my inventory for me for this specific stock code in SYSPRO. So I can go ahead and see the details on this. If you're using multiple bins, you're also going to be able to look at that multi-bin information. But you'll notice all of this information is directly from SYSPRO. So this is exactly what I would see in SYSPRO in real time as well. If you're multi-bin, you're also going to notice that I have a bins tab here. If you're not multiple bins yet, riteSCAN's always going to know that information and it would just hide that for you. If you wanted to drill into details or look at each specific bin location, you can see each of your specific bin locations, quantities on hand, and then the details about that as well if you want to drill into further details. So this is just a quick and easy way to get to your inventory information through riteSCAN if you're standing in the middle of the warehouse wondering where something might be or where you have it on hand. From the other perspective, you also have the ability to perform a stock take. So the stock take process works directly with your SYSPRO stock take system. So if you go ahead and start your stock take in SYSPRO, select what warehouses, stock codes, all of that you're going to count. Now riteSCAN will see that that stock take is in progress, and I can actually begin to do the stock take capture in riteSCAN. So I have a stock take that's set up and running for my warehouse S. It knows that it's a multi-bin warehouse, so it's also going to ask me for my bin. I can then go ahead and scan my stock code that I'm counting. If you want to enter your quantity, you can go ahead and just enter your quantity to perform at that point in time. And now what you're able to do is post this transaction to SYSPRO. So when I talk about posting this to SYSPRO, what this is going to allow me to do is actually perform those counts on the warehouse floor. And all of that data is going to be fed back to SYSPRO. So you could have one person out there counting, 20 people out there counting, and all that data is being fed back to SYSPRO directly. So then at the very end, that supervisor can go in and they're going to be able to see what was counted in riteSCAN versus what was actually supposed to be in inventory. You can send them out to recount or actually make the adjustment to inventory at that time. So the other transactions that we can kind of take a look at is going to be your warehouse or bin transfers. I talked about SmartScan earlier, SmartScan being the ability to put multiple pieces of data into a single barcode. So what I can do here basically is if I have a barcode containing multiple pieces of data, I can go ahead and scan that. And what you'll notice is riteSCAN's going to actually put that data into each of the fields on my handheld for me at that point in time, and then I can post that transaction. So with SmartScan, you're actually able to put that all together. I think my screen is lagging here. Give me just a second. I think you guys are behind what I'm seeing on the handheld itself. I'm just going to try to reshare my screen here. Give me 1 second. Gotta love these mobile emulators when you're looking at things. Let me go ahead and just try to reshare this. Looks like my mobile emulator is just not going to cooperate with me today. Give me a second. I'm going to actually show it to you guys on the Windows client. So then you can see the difference between the Windows client and Android. And we won't be waiting on these delays that are happening with the emulator. I'm going to do this here quick. Tara, are you able to see the Windows client now?
Yes, now I can.
All right. Sounds good.
Never fails for something to go wrong during a demo.
I know, right? No matter how much time you spend on it, it wouldn't lag at all before. And I see you guys are seeing the lags, but I don't see it on my handheld. So, but that makes it much more difficult. So what we'll do here is we'll just go through the Windows client. So you could use a tethered barcode scanner. Often customers will use the Windows client specifically for your receiving processes for sure. Also, you'll see customers that are using a laptop with a Bluetooth barcode scanner on a cart. And they find that to be just as easy as some of the mobile devices. And it really just comes down to your environment and what's going to be the easiest deployment for you and fit each of your different processes. And a lot of customers will use a mix of those as well. I might have a couple of handhelds that I use for the sales order picking processes, but my receiving and job receipt processes, I use a Windows client with a tethered barcode scanner because I don't need that mobility quite as much. So we talked about the bin warehouse transfer process. If you're utilizing pallets, you'll notice that riteSCAN is going to automatically put that pallet information in there. But I can also do it from a stock code level. So if I do it, go back to my stock code mode, what you're able to do is simply scan your stock code that you're going to be moving, put in your quantity. If you don't have it barcoded, you can scan or enter your warehouses. You'll also have these browse capabilities with each of these. So if I wanted to look at my inventory, I can browse my warehouse. Because it's multi-bin, it's also asking for my bin location that we're pulling it from. We're going to go ahead and pull it. I could browse my open bin locations to see where I have inventory for this. And then now where are we going to bring it to? So we're going to go ahead and scan our warehouse FG that we're bringing it to, and we're going to go bin location FG. Go ahead and post this transaction. Now, as soon as you post that transaction, riteSCAN's going to send that data directly into SYSPRO at that point in time. So all of that data is being fed into SYSPRO, and it's going to be real time. So if you go look at a history now, you're going to go see your movements, and you're going to be able to see that specifically that transaction happened in SYSPRO, and you're going to see that movement transaction that just happened in riteSCAN as well. So, right. The next sort of transaction that we want to take a look at is the receiving process. So with the PO receipt process, this is where you're going to automate your label printing processes and be able to receipt those lines into inventory right from the warehouse floor. So if you have your POs barcoded, that's great. You can scan it in there. If not, you can simply browse your open POs and select which PO you want to receipt in at that point in time. So we're going to select our PO. And at this point, there's some customers that will have items barcoded, others that might not at that point in time. So you're going to be able to just simply select your line or scan your item that you're wanting to receive in at that point in time. You're also going to be able to perform your job receipt transactions at this point in time. This is where you can look up or scan your jobs that you're wanting to receipt in. So you can select that job from the list here. I could also scan that job in. At this point, this is where you can put your quantity to produce and your bin location that you're going to be receiving it into. If I wanted to browse my open bins, I could also browse my open bins, post this transaction, and it's going to perform that job receipt. You're also able to do what's called linking to kit issue. So if I wanted to job receipt that transaction and link directly to the kit issue process, at this point in time, it's going to issue those materials for that job. Notice that it's going to pull it from the bin location, or I can enter my bin location if I don't have default bins set up. If I needed to not issue a specific line, I can also select which lines I would want to issue. And notice this is going to be based off my quantity to make at this point in time. So now it's going to post that job receipt. It's also going to issue those materials. And if I needed to print any labels at this point in time, I can also print my barcode labels for those finished goods as well. The last sort of module that I want to just take a quick look at before we run out of time is going to be the order picking process. So within order picking, you're able to scan or look up your sales orders to pick at this point in time. So you can select from the list, and you're going to notice that you can actually filter sort this list based on the sales orders that you want to pick. So once we select a line, it's going to pull up each of my lines to pick at this point in time, and that operator is going to be able to scan each of those line items and then complete the process, updating the sales order to a status 8 or a status 4, depending on what I want to build for my workflow at that perspective. So a lot of flexibility in building that full system of being able to create a complete workflow from a sales order picking perspective. All right, I'm going to go back and wrap it out with our PowerPoint here. I'm going to switch my screen. Tara, can you let me know once you can see the PowerPoint again?
Sure, it's starting to come up now. I can see it.
So when you talk about migrating from a paper-based system, really what we're focusing on with the mobile warehouse solution is how do we go to that paperless system and what is it really going to get? The biggest thing from a takeaway perspective is that visibility and access to real-time information from your single source of truth, which is SYSPRO. And that's what's really going to allow you to achieve that greater inventory accuracy and move your inventory towards that. You're really going to also gain from improving those workflows, which are going to be more efficient within your warehouse processes for being able to pick items, stage items, and double check those items that they're making sure you're picking the correct items and sending those to the customers. At the end of the day, really all of these items are what's going to lead to that improved customer service, as well as happier customers and happier employees being able to do those automated processes within the warehouse. With that being said, we're just going to open it up for questions here.
All right, we will give people a minute here to submit their questions via the chat window. Okay. First question, is riteSCAN compatible with SYSPRO 8?
Yes, so basically riteSCAN is compatible with SYSPRO 8 and all the way back to SYSPRO 6.1. So it's compatible with SYSPRO 6.1, 7, and 8. We have customers that are using riteSCAN on 8 already today.
Okay, I have another question here. This is just to confirm, our warehouse employees who would need scanning capabilities do not take up our SYSPRO seats.
Correct. So even though you're logging in with your user credentials from SYSPRO, because it's using the E.NET business objects, it's not actually taking up any of your normal SYSPRO user seats. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds where you're getting that real-time visibility and SYSPRO still allowing them to get in and perform those transactions, but not using up those core SYSPRO seats.
Okay. This is, Ryan, just a little more of a clarification. How does riteSCAN work with SYSPRO to update the inventory in real time and maintain the data integrity?
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the E.NET business objects, that's what riteSCAN uses to perform those transactions in real time, and that's what gives you that data integrity. But basically what the E.NET business objects are is the APIs into SYSPRO. So every transaction that's performed is always using those APIs. There's not two separate databases or anything like that. SYSPRO is your database, SYSPRO is your system of record, and all of those transactions are fed back and forth in real time between the systems.
Okay, another question here. Will the Android version of riteSCAN, so will that run on a mobile phone?
Yes, so riteSCAN Android will run on a mobile phone as long as it's on Android 5.1 or newer, which most are these days. you're going to be able to run that. It's called an APK file, but at the Android platform of the app on that device.
One last question here. Can riteSCAN print labels during the stock tape to label inventory?
Yeah, often that's a question we get asked is, if I don't have labels, is how do I get started on it? And there's 3 ways to basically get started on it. You can do that process in the stock take, where you're going to be performing the stock take and then also printing those labels during that stock take process directly from riteSCAN. So I count an item and then I post it and I print the labels. You can definitely do that. Some of the other approaches that customers will use is they'll use ad hoc printing in riteSCAN to slowly print those labels, and on a weekly basis I might go label this section of the warehouse or these items, and I just utilize ad hoc printing to begin that process of labeling everything. The other way, which is more of a slow churn method, is I start to utilize riteSCAN for my receiving processes and automate the label printing. At that point, that way I'm getting my team familiar, starting to churn that inventory with labels, and then I might just have a subsection of my warehouse that I would need to go print labels for ad hoc or through stock takes as well.
Okay, that looks like that's a wrap for our questions.
All right, well, I appreciate everyone joining us today, and if you have any questions about riteSCAN or want to see an in-depth demo or just talk about how it might work within your organization, feel free to reach out to myself or Tara, and we can definitely schedule that demo or discovery session for riteSCAN as well. And I just seen your question in regards to the recording. Definitely we'll be following up with the recording from today's session that'll be sent out to all the registrants.
Perfect. Thank you all for your time today. Definitely appreciate it.